Sure. Okay.
Excellent. So Richard gave us a wonderful opening prayer. Next, I'm going to give an introduction to the webinar series, explain what it's all about. Then we'll get into some introductions and get to know each other. After which I have a short trailer video prepared, previewing some of the virtual site visits and the presentations that will be featured throughout the webinar series. And then next I'll share some tasks that we have put together for all of you to complete during the series. Don't worry, because the ask is very minimal. It's certainly voluntary. I know everyone's very busy, but what we hope is that it'll make it worthwhile for you to participate in the whole series. So that's what the kind of purpose is there. After that, I'm going to pass it to Cameron Stelly with the U.S. Forest Service to talk about a project he's working on relating to the Silvics of North America publication. And then we have 10 minutes at the end for everyone to complete a short written reflection. Obviously, where it's the first one in the series, it might not have a whole lot of content, but just in a gist what you're thinking, and we'll get to that at the end. Then we'll reconvene after a break and share any parting thoughts before we close out today's webinar. There we go. So where did this webinar start? I am one of the newer employees here in the Climate Resilience Program, and being the Forest Adaptation Technical Assistant, I focus and specialize in the forest ecosystem, but I work with a lot of different natural resource staff across our membership on climate adaptation. And so this more general climate change work has actually led to a lot of collaboration internally here at USET. We started to see a lot of work overlap with the work that I was involved in and the work that Colin Martin, the former USET wetland specialist, was involved in. So we decided to capitalize on that collaboration and come together to form an event. So we applied for funding through the BIA Tribal Resiliency Program to offer a series of trainings focused on adaptation work, both in the forest and wetland space across the USET region. But the true goal of the series is more than just to bring together different areas of USET, the wetlands and forests. It's more about bringing together everyone here on the call today. And so what we hope is that throughout the series, the conversations that we share and the work that we highlight in each of the webinars will foster a community of practice, or a working group, if you will, a forest and wetland working group. We recognize the power of working together. It's at the bottom of the slide here in our slogan, because there is strength in unity. And we also realize that unity exists in our natural world. Throughout the series, the projects that are highlighted show a very strong connection to the wetland and forest spaces that the projects are engaging. Each habitat relies on the other so much, and that balance is extremely important to protect, especially in the threats of climate change. And so I think these projects actually do a really good job of highlighting the importance of protecting that balance, that important balance. This is webinar 1 in a 6-part series. And after this kickoff webinar, we have 4 webinars, which will take a closer focus on a particular ecosystem or project that one of our member tribal nations is involved in or leading, actually leading. Each of these 4 webinars have a common structure throughout. We will hear from tribal nation program managers and staff involved in the project, both through forms of presentation and then virtual site visits, which I'll preview in a little while. And we will also hear from subject matter experts on these various ecosystems and some climate scientists, both of which will share information, tools, resources, and some concepts that could be useful if integrated into the work that you guys are involved in and the work of the projects that are being highlighted. There will be opportunities for participants to ask all the presenters follow-up questions. And we also have worked in time at the end of each webinar to write a brief writing reflection. And we encourage everybody participating to share those reflections, because I think that type of dialogue and sharing reflections is where we're going to start to work toward making that forest and wetlands working group. if everyone's comfortable with sharing their thoughts, I think will make for really profitable Zoom calls in the future and throughout the rest of the series. Now I have more to share about the writing reflections and the tasks that we're assigning everyone throughout the series. But before we do that, I think it would be good to do some introductions. So why don't we go ahead and do some introductions? So group introductions. We would love to hear from everyone on the call. So if you have the bandwidth to unmute and turn your camera on, we encourage you to do so. And we ask that you share with us your name, tribal nation, the organization you work for, your job title, and then what your favorite wetland space is and why. And so I know that takes a little bit of thought. So I'll go first. You all know that my name is Tyler Everett. I'm a citizen of Mi'kmaq Nation. But in addition to working here at United South and Eastern Tribes as the Forest Adaptation Technical Assistant, I also work as a forester for the Passamaquoddy tribe. I'm also a PhD student at the University of Maine. And through that work, learned that my favorite wetland space is a brown or black ash wetland forest. I focused a lot of my studies and my work on learning about these wetlands and how to address the invasive forest pest, the emerald ash borer, in these spaces. And for those places as buggy and muggy and wet and hard to navigate as they are, I really think they're beautiful. I really enjoy spending time in them. I love the view when you look up into the canopy and it's mostly ash in the overstory. And so you look through all the compound leaves as they overlap. It's really pretty place to be. So I've been really fortunate to work and do my studies in a lot of these wetland spaces. And so that's why it's my favorite. So now I will copy this introduction prompt and I'll put it in the chat. But first, to give you guys some more time, I'm going to pass it along to the rest of the USET staff on the call. So I'll pass it first to Casey.
Awesome. Thank you, Tyler. Winikisak, Natasuis, Casey Thornbrew, Natomas Masipiat, Guy Natai Masipiat. Good day, everyone. My name is Casey Thornbrew. I'm a citizen of the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe, and I'm coming to you from my home in Mashpee. I live in Mashpee. It's located on Cape Cod, Massachusetts, and our homelands are really all for Wampanoag. Those are the First Light. Our folks, which is called, some people say Wampanoag now, but kind of southeastern Massachusetts and the islands. I work for United South and Eastern Tribes, USET, and I work with the Southeast Climate Adaptation Science Center and the Northeast Climate Adaptation Science Center as a tribal climate science liaison. My work entails connecting tribal nations and staff and managers within tribal nations to people, information, and other resources at these climate adaptation science centers, commonly referred to as CASCs. And I also serve as a program manager for USET's climate program, for which Tyler and I work on. It's a small but growing department within USET to provide the technical support for climate change adaptation. Let me dive right into that last one, the favorite wetland space. I'll be brief. I have two. One you can see on my screen here. This is called, excuse me, an area known as Sage Lot Pond. It's our tribal homeland where the salt marsh hits Nantucket Sound. This picture was taken, it was kind of foggy, but beyond back that way, you would see Nantucket Sound, kind of our connection to the Atlantic Ocean. It's a favorite place for me to take my nieces and nephews. When my daughter gets old enough, I'll be taking her out there to go cohogging, to get clams, to kind of wade in the water, swim around. maybe find a big old horseshoe crab, and then the second favorite space, of course, is the inland space, our Atlantic white cedar forest. So Katapatanamu, thank you all. Just eyeballing the screen here, I'm not sure if we have at present any other staff from USET, but let me just double check before moving on. Anyone who has joined from USET, like to introduce yourself? Anyone in addition to Tyler and I?
Yeah, I'm not seeing any either, Casey. I think
Okay.
it's just us today.
And I'm sure people will be joining throughout the series, and that's kind of how we set this up too. So anyone who hasn't had the chance to introduce themselves will be sure to do so. So I'm going to go ahead and move to staff, managers, representatives, and leaders from tribal nations that have joined. Again, I'm kind of eyeballing the who's on, but I don't want to miss anyone. So I'm going to go through all who the tribal nations who registered. So if I call out the tribal nation you represent or work for, please feel free to introduce yourself and respond to the introduction questions. So let me start from, do we have anyone on from Alabama Coushatta tribe? Excuse me, Alabama Coushatta tribe of Texas. Okay, moving on to Catawba Indian Nation. Catawba Indian Nation. Okay. Chickahominy Indian tribe. Chickahominy Indian tribe Eastern Division. Okay. Do we have folks on from the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians?
Yes, this is Heather Gregory. I guess I'll introduce myself. I work for the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians. I've been here 10 years. I am the Wetlands Program Manager, and I'm also the Environmental Laboratory Technician. I do a lot of work with water quality on the tribal lands. My favorite wetland space, I would have to say, would probably be a salt marsh, because that's where I got my very first experience with wetlands to begin with when I was in college, and I just fell in love with it. So that's my favorite.
Thank you, Heather. You're also going to be presenting in one of the webinars. Do you want to
Yes, I
give a
am.
quick couple words on what you're working on and will be presenting on?
Yeah, well, I'll have, of course, just a kind of like an introduction to what the program is all about and what we're doing and where we're at right now. And then we'll be going into a little bit more detail about our herbarium and seed banking ventures here. And I was wondering, is it okay if we do it over, if we film it with my iPhone?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, then we're all good.
Yeah. So you're saying that you want to take the phone and show us what's on your end.
We were gonna make a little video.
Oh, okay.
And show exactly how we mount the specimens and store them in the herbarium cabinets and everything.
Oh, cool.
And
Yeah.
go a little bit into detail about the seed bank too.
Awesome. Yeah, I really look forward to that. You can when you're done filming it, just send it to my email.
Okay.
And I'll make sure I have the file uploaded here so that it shares with everyone on the call as smooth as possible.
Okay, sounds good.
Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Go ahead and keep going through, Casey.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you very much. And just double checking for moving on. Anyone else joining from Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians?
I'm it.
Okay. I think we'll have especially during that session where we'll have the presentation, I'm sure we'll have more folks on. So awesome. Moving right along. And again, just opportunities to introduce your name, your tribal nation or organization, your job title, and tell us a little bit about your favorite wetland space and why. So moving right along on the registration list, do we have anyone on, in addition to myself, from Mashpee Wampanoag Tribe? Okay, moving on to Mi'kmaq Nation. I think we have a couple folks on from Mi'kmaq Nation.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can. Good afternoon.
Okay, great. This is John Scott calling in here. I can't seem to get my video up and running, so for some reason, but if you can all hear me, I'll do my introduction. Okay, so my name is John Scott, and thank you for having me here this afternoon. I'm a licensed forester. I work here in Maine, and I work for Mi'kmaq Nation as the forestry program manager. And well, my duties here as forestry program manager entails a few different things. I'm a fairly new employee to the tribe. However, I've been working with Mi'kmaq Nation for roughly 12 years. Became an actual full-time employee working for them roughly 7 months ago. And I'm very thankful I am. But my duties here thus far have involved a variety of different things. First off, just managing the tribe's forest resource, forest management planning, timber sale administration, contract development, those sorts of things. I also oversee the development of a forestry mulcher that we own at the tribe and utilize on our own properties, and also privately as well in a commercial sense. And then we also overseeing roughly, we have a Christmas tree farm. We oversee that, and we also have a commercial drone program that we're trying to develop, working on that, and a sawmill operation as well, working to become more self-sufficient, supply some of our own lumber, that sort of thing. And then also I just assist the tribe in a variety of other different manners, such as working with our youth department, working with the tribal council on forestry related matters, and working with the tribe on projects such as this with our partners at the University of Maine and with USET, and in manners such as this. My favorite wetland species, I would say, would be a forested wetland, preferably with lots of brown ash and healthy trees. So that's what I got. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, John, and pleasure to meet you. So glad to have you join us.
You too.
Awesome. Want to keep it open up others from the Mi'kmaq Nation. Oh, hello, Dina. I believe you're still on mute.
Sorry, I had to step away for a minute. I had a phone call. So is everybody else gone from the Mi'kmaq tribe?
I believe we have yourself and Vice Chief Richard Syllaboy.
Okay. Dina Winslow, Mi'kmaq Nation. I'm the tribal planner and grant writer for the tribe. And my favorite wetland, I think there isn't any that I don't like. I mean, I was sitting there thinking, as long as they're not too full of mosquitoes and black flies, I'm happy.
Awesome. Agreed. Me also keep moving forward. So we have from Mi'kmaq Nation, Vice Chief Richard Syllaboy. Are you still on? And would you introduce yourself?
I am. My name is Richard Syllaboy. I'm Vice Chief for the Mi'kmaq Nation, and I've been involved with the Mi'kmaq Nation since 1982, almost continuously. I've spent a few years not involved because of our elections. I am a master basket maker, so they say, and I enjoy that. I've learned from participation as a child, and the easy jobs that I had, taking out wood, taking out shavings, holding a flashlight, and stuff like that. And evidently continued to work with baskets. My favorite wetland is not only the brown ash swales, but also cedar swamps. As my mother was a basket maker, and when the boys weren't available to help with the brown ash, her and I would go into cedar swamp and cut down a cedar tree, and she would make baskets out of that. So I enjoyed doing that, and I've times I've worked in the woods, I've cut a lot of cedar in the past. So just glad to be here today with you guys. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Vice Chief, and so glad to have you here joining us. Moving right along, want to go to, do we have anyone on from Penobscot Nation? Okay. Moving along, we have, want to open up for anyone, I believe we do have someone joining from the Porch Band of Creek Indians.
Yes, that's me.
Awesome.
Hi, my name is Savoy Thrower. Yeah, I'm with the Porch Band of Creek Indians. I work in our environmental department. I'm the environmental protection specialist. Mainly what I do is water quality monitoring, but we are just starting a wetland program. We worked with USET in the past 2 years, a little bit here and there, to try to get the ball rolling for a wetland program, and got a grant for it. So we're really excited to do more with that. We have a lot of pitcher plant bogs around where we live here, and so that's probably my favorite type of wetland to explore, and really special, where they all the carnivorous plants and all kind of strange species you can only find around here there. So yeah, thank you.
Wonderful. Pleasure to meet you, Savoy, and thank you for joining us. Moving right along, I want to check, do we have anyone from Seminole Tribe of Florida on with us this afternoon?
Good afternoon. Thank you. Bandwidth does not allow video where I'm at. My name is Grant Stillman. I'm the forester for the Seminole Tribe of Florida. And we've actually been doing quite a bit of wetland enhancement work and wetland studies. Recently, I'm reading over a study that we're doing right now of monitoring and getting baseline data on our wetland deep water sloughs. So walking in the deep water sloughs, chest deep with alligators and pythons, brings a new appreciation to cypress domes. But I was reading 20 minutes ago about how we discovered 226 species of plants in 10 plots. So very high functionality within the wetlands is very nice to see. And maybe one day we'll get some people and go trumpet through the swamp. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Grant. And pleasure to meet you and have you join us from Seminole Tribe of Florida. Awesome. Moving right along, we also have registered from Upper Mattaponi Indian Tribe. Upper Mattaponi.
Hey everyone, my name is Kyle McLemore. I'm a citizen of the Tule River Tribe in California, but I work here in Virginia for the Upper Mattaponi. Started working for the Upper Mattaponi back in March, and I'm an environmental technician. Kind of do and study lots of different areas within the environmental realm. My favorite wetland space, I probably have to go with the salt marshes, because I love to see herons. I love to see a great blue heron flying around. And yeah, that's it off the top of my head. I'm glad to be here, and I hope to gain some more knowledge on wetlands. So it's nice to meet you all.
Awesome. Pleasure. Good to see you again, Kyle.
You too.
And pleasure to have you with us joining from Upper Mattaponi Indian Tribe. Want to also acknowledge, I think we have Professor John Daigle also on. Good afternoon, John. Do you want to say hello and introduce yourself?
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I wasn't sure if I should chime in because I'm also a citizen member of the Penobscot Nation, but also a professor at the University of Maine. And it's in the School of Forest Resources, and I have the pleasure of working with Tyler as my PhD student. I learned just as much from Tyler. I hope that, that he does for me. That's the secret of being a professor. Sometimes you're learning just as much from the students you're teaching, which is fun. But I've been involved with a number of projects with some of the tribal communities from climate change, but more intensely around the Emil-Ash borer. These past decade, I've had the great pleasure of working with Richard and Dina for many years and continue that relationship. And now with John Scott, who recently has come on board. And I've worked with quite a few, all the tribal communities here in Maine, but also involving other tribal communities in New York and Michigan around this Emil-Ash borer. And where's my favorite? Oh, I guess, see my background. It's my canoe. It's a birch stream. I think it's probably the wetland areas that are connected by streams and rivers that are kind of my favorite. I love canoeing and spending time along the shores of water bodies. Love brown ash and fiddleheads and so many things that come from wetland areas. They're just special places. So I'll stop there.
Awesome. Thank you, John. Such a pleasure to have you join us for this webinar series. I'm gonna excuse me, pass it back over to Tyler. Before I do, just one more check. Are there any others, managers, leaders, staff joining us from tribal nations that have not had the chance to introduce themselves and tell us your favorite wetland space? So let me just double check on that before we move on. Anyone else from tribal nations? Okay, and I'm sure as others join in subsequent or the following webinars, we'll also meet new people along the way. Let me go ahead and hand it back over to continue these introductions to Tyler.
Thank you, Casey. Appreciate you for coordinating that. I'll pass it along to Emily Francis. She's gonna be seen in one of the virtual site visits that'll be shown during the webinar series. Fellow PhD student of mine over at the University of Maine. If you're able to, Emily, do you want to give your introduction?
Sure, Tyler. Thank you. I must not have, apparently I didn't turn on my video when I signed in and now it's not letting me. So I will just say hi, just verbally. I am one of John Daigle's, I'm a PhD candidate working with John and Tyler. And I am not, I do not have an Indigenous background, even though my last name is Francis and in Maine that can be a little confusing. So I am at the University of Maine working with the Emil-Ash borer issue. And my favorite wetland space, I have never gotten to live near bogs before, and it's very exciting that there is the Sunk Hayes National Wildlife Refuge, which has a huge peat bog in it right over the bridge from Old Town, Maine and Milford Bradley area. So that has been a really awesome place to get to explore being in Central Maine. So thank you, and I'm excited for this whole event and all of the information that we'll learn and get to share with each other.
Awesome, thank you, Emily. Yes, sorry, I called you PhD student. You earned that PhD candidate status. So
no worries, you'll be there very soon, Tyler.
Knock on wood. Let's pass it off to Adam Tarando.
Thanks, Tyler. And my name is Adam Tarando. I'm a research scientist with the U.S. Geological Survey with the Southeast Climate Adaptation Science Center. And so I work with Casey quite a bit. I'm located in Raleigh, in North Carolina. I'm a climate scientist by training, and that's the flavor of my talk I'll be giving in September. I'm neither a forester nor a wetland specialist or wetland scientist, but hopefully I can fill in some useful pieces from the climate science and climate change angle on things. So my favorite wetland space, similar to Sohoy's answer, being in the South, I'll say a longleaf pine savanna, which is sometimes dry, sometimes wet, and is really unique spaces. And especially if you like carnivorous plants in the U.S., that's the place to go. So good to meet you all and to see you all, and look forward to talking with you more when I give my presentation in a few weeks. Thanks.
Thank you, Adam. I know we'll get a lot of benefit from your presentation on climate data, so I'm looking forward to it. I'll pass it on to Cameron Stelly, who's going to give us the talk later today.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me. As Tyler said, my name is Cameron Stelly. I'm with the U.S. Forest Service. Specifically, I work out of the Southeast Climate Hub, which is located here in Durham, North Carolina. And my job specifically is the U.S. coordinator for the updated Silvics of North America project, which that is our effort to update the Silvics of North America manual that I'll be talking about later today. And my favorite wetland space, prior to arriving in North Carolina, I was living in Texas. And so my favorite space was the Caddo Lake wetlands. It's on the Texas-Louisiana border. Specifically the bald cypress that are there, I find particularly beautiful. Also a nice space to commute around. So.
Awesome, thank you, Cameron. So I'll go on in the presentation here. Back to sharing my screen. Thank you, everybody, for your introductions. And I think what Grant Steelman said, I also would love to explore around in some of the wetlands that people shared were their favorite. So I'm excited that we're all connecting, and hopefully we can get out to these wetlands and forests that we love at some point in time in person. So next I'm going to do a sneak peek at the content for the series. I want to share a short video. It's a preview video that I prepared myself, but the filming was done by other folks. And so I just took that content and kind of pulled it together. But unfortunately, I do not have these amazing skill sets that those who make these videos do have. And so I did lower the quality of the video from 1080 down. And so it's a little less clear. And then they also, when I merged them, the software I used put this watermark in the corner of the video. That watermark isn't associated with anyone that's actually put in lots of hard work into these videos. And so we can just ignore that. So to sum this up, what you will see here is a preview, which I, at least when I watched it, got me excited about the webinars to come, but it's not the real deal. And when the real deal is shared in the future webinars, it'll be even better. It'll really blow you away. So I encourage you to join all the webinars that we share throughout the series. And I'd also like to acknowledge those who were actually contributors to the filming and the presentations by our tribal nations. So we've got Mi'kmaq Nation, Penobscot Nation, the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians, the Alabama Coshada Tribe of Texas, Nolan Altivator is a citizen of the Passamaquoddy Tribe at Pleasant Point, Sebayk, and he's a professional videographer. And then Fauna Creative is a video production company that helped film is going to help film one of the site visits in our series, and then Nature Conservancy of Texas in Texas, and then of course the University of Maine. And so I'm going to stop my share here and share that video now.
Hey, Tyler. Sorry, apologies to interrupt, just real quick. One quick double check. I want to make sure we caught everyone in their introductions. I
Good
was
call.
my notes here. Just one more last call. Has anyone not had the opportunity to introduce themselves and mention your favorite wetland? Okay, just wanted to double check, and if you have or had any audio issues, please feel free to put it in the chat. Back over to you, Tyler.
Awesome. Thank you, Casey. I'm glad you remembered that. All right, so I will share this video once I pull it up.
Also, while the video is running, we've tested it and we had a pretty good showing. But if you have any trouble on your end, sometimes closing the camera, your own screen, your own camera might help with the bandwidth on your end.
Having some full screen issues there. Here we go. Share sound, optimize. Cool. All right, I'm going to mute myself so I'm not talking over it, and same with everyone else. And with bandwidth, if we can shut our videos off and mute ourselves, it'll be a little easier to see and hear. If anyone's having trouble, you can throw an alert to me in the chat and I'll try to address it. Here we go.
The longleaf pine has been a part of our culture for many centuries. It's a very important species to our people. We would use the trees to make our cabins. We would use the needles to make our baskets. So, it's very important that we move that tradition down, because once we lose that information, we lose part of our culture. And the same thing happens to the species. If we lose that species, it's no longer part of our culture. When you see a basket and you open it up, you look in there, there's nothing in there except you can see the weaving. But it's not empty. The basket is full of love. It's full of happiness. It's important to have those thoughts. Let's be thankful for the Creator giving these longleaf pine trees to be able to continue with this legacy.
Longleaf pine is the historic tree of the South, from Florida to East Texas, and then up into the Carolinas. What once was 90 million acres was logged out, and by the early 1900s was virtually lost from the landscape. I mean, looking at 98% loss of this species. And I call it the tree that fire built. Without fire, you don't have longleaf. Fire suppression, or removing fire from the landscape, has attributed to the loss of this habitat that needs fire to exist.
For our people, we use fire as a tool to clear the brush, keep trails open, trade routes open. We use it as a hunting technique. We used it to keep the woods healthy, just maintain a healthy ecosystem in the area where you're living. Taking a lot of that, applying it to what we're doing today. We want to make sure that these longleaf pines are stimulated, make sure they have some good growth. I personally wanted to bring this resource back to the tribe, make it readily accessible, and take advantage of the longleaf that is here.
The brown ash tree, it's a very spiritual tree. You know, it's part of our creation story. Our creation story is that Gluskab shot an arrow into the brown ash tree, and that's where the natives come singing and dancing out of the brown ash. I've made baskets for the past 35, 40 years, and brown ash has always been very important to me, to us as basket makers. I grew up as making baskets with my family.
Brown ash in particular is culturally significant. That means a lot to me, connecting to my culture. My great-grandmother and great-grandfather both made baskets. My grandmother grew up with them in Nova Scotia and then moved to Aroostook County when she was really young. Made potato baskets up here, and I make the joke that Richard's family was so good at making potato baskets that my family had to head south and sell fancy baskets.
The kids have done some basket making projects, learned about the ash tree and how important it is, and trees and forestry in general, to kind of introduce them to the idea of a career in forestry potentially. So kind of bringing along that next generation of kids to be involved in what might happen with tribal stuff in the future.
Some of the basket makers in Michigan actually contacted some of the basket makers in Maine about this insect killing ash trees, and just to be aware, and maybe we could find out more information. So that really kind of triggered some of the initial investigations, kind of put it on the radar screen, and I started to work reaching out with the Maine Forest Service, U.S. Forest Service, to have some meetings about this emerald ash borer and seeing about what's going on in Michigan, kind of the Great Lakes region, and is it coming towards our state.
It has come across from Michigan east and west from where it was first found. It come in on the ships and on pallets. You know, the pallets were not dipped or purified, and the emerald ash borer come in on them. And that come into the shores of Michigan, and it's spread in all directions since then. Hopefully we can, we can create something that the tree will be able to tolerate the emerald ash borer.
Hi, I'm Aram Calhoun. I'm a retired professor from the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Conservation Biology at the University of Maine. And I spent my career working on wetland ecology and conservation. I ended up working with forested wetlands because I'm sort of a person who likes to work with the underdog, and it wasn't until the late 70s that they were even regulated. And of course, it's not a glamorous species. Wood frogs and salamanders I discovered through my work. A lot of people think they're disgusting and slimy and don't want to hold them. So I am inspired working for underappreciated ecosystems. Being a small, unnoticed person, I can understand the wood frog and how it's feeling. And so basically, I do have a passion for working with amphibians, and I got that from the early age. I was always out in the wetlands in my neighborhood.
My name is Ben Simpson, and I am the Wildlife Resource Manager for the Penobscot Nation. So I am not a tribal member, but I feel working in this position, I have learned from tribal members that we have a lot of the same sensibilities as far as the natural world, and I feel like I fit in with their ideas of how the world works and the importance of wildlife and protection of the environment. And I feel it's been incredibly fulfilling in my career to work for the Penobscot Nation so far. My focus is primarily on big game species. That's what I was hired for. but considering my position in our department is 100% grant driven, we have to try and find funding from all avenues we can. And the Environmental Protection Agency, they offer wetland grants for tribes that I have applied for a few times. The tribe relies on forestry in order to generate income, and they already have practices in place to protect sensitive areas that they follow federal guidelines, which are more strict than state guidelines. And so the one thing that we don't have guidelines for that are set are vernal pools. I know that foresters and the loggers will protect sensitive areas like vernal pools, but having a mapped areas of where those vernal pools are would be a great benefit to them. And so the tribe would like to map those areas in order to protect them as much as we possibly can. And so for the last 2 EPA grants, I wrote a proposal to try and get money or funding for the tribe to map vernal pools on tribal land in order to add that to the list of areas to protect.
There, so that gives you a little bit of a taste of what's to come for some of the virtual site visits and presentations from our contributors to the Forest and Wetland webinar series across the tribal nations that have gotten involved so far. And so we're a little bit over on the schedule, but what I'd like to do now is pass it off to Cameron Stelly to do a presentation on the Silvics of North America project. Cameron, if you want to go ahead and try and check in on your screen share abilities, we can resolve any issues we might have.
Okay, sure. Yeah, let me try to share the presentation real quick. Does not look like I'm able to share. It says that it's host disabled right now.
Yep, I can make you a co-host, no problem.
Okay, yeah, no worries.
Yep. And okay, should be good to go.
Alrighty. Okay, can y'all see that?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Sorry, I lost my Zoom screen, but alrighty. So yeah, so as per the introductions earlier, my name is Cameron Stelly. I'm with the U.S. Forest Service, specifically working right now as the U.S. coordinator for the updated Silvics of North America project, which has been our initiative to revise and update the existing reference manual guide, the Silvics of North America. I'm sure people will be familiar with this document to varying degrees, but I'll give some general background on the document regardless. So just a quick overview for the presentation today. I'll talk a little bit about the history of the Silvics of North America, SNA. I'll talk about how the USNAP, which is this project, was initiated. I'll go over what are some of the long-term goals of the project. I'll talk about the structure of the new SNA, as well as some of the associated project teams that we have that are internal, that are working on developing this. I'll talk about what the authorship process looks like and what the review process looks like. We'll touch base on the timeline, and then I'll conclude with different ways that folks can get involved if they're interested, and then I will open it up for questions at the end. So a little bit of background on the Silvics of North America. So this document was first published in the 1960s under the name the Silvics of Forest Trees of the United States. And this was really the first comprehensive species-specific silvicultural guide for the US, but at this point it was also predominantly well, not predominantly, it was specifically a US document that had about 120 or so species represented in it. This was expanded in 1990, and this is when it got the name changed to the Silvix of North America, and so it was upgraded to about 190 species and incorporated species that were found in Mexico as well as Canada. And this is the current working manual that we have now, which again is great, referenced often. But something that the Forest Service was becoming aware of was that it's also, a lot of this research is about 40 years out of date. Specifically research areas such as genetics, climate change impacts, range maps. We're missing a lot of new and relevant research. And so that's what really prompted this look at updating this manual. And so, and this is just to give you an idea of what the current layout of the Silvix of North America is. So there are hard copies that exist, but it's also a PDF that anybody can access. It's set up into two categories, being conifers and hardwoods. And within those chapters, or within those sections, you can go up and look up any tree species that you like, provided it's in the species that we're written about. And every species chapter will follow the same format that's laid out on the right. And so all of those sections will be represented with the guide of this being the background information that you would need in order to do appropriate tree management. It's not necessarily an encyclopedia on every possible piece of information about a tree species, but really what you would need to do silviculture. So again, so with the backdrop of it being, roughly 40 years out of date, there was 3 studies that were done by the University of Georgia, specifically Dr. Pete Bettinger, in collaboration with Dr. Stephen McNulty. And Stephen McNulty is the principal investigator of this project. And so they did 3 scientific studies to look at if we were to update the manual, what specifically should we update, and if foresters in the field felt that it was appropriate. So this first study that's mentioned here specifically looked at range maps. The second study was more of a comprehensive look at foresters in the field and how they felt about the manual. And then this third study was looking at the importance of a species as it relates to published literature. And so that kind of gives us a jumping off point in terms of, are there important species that, have lots of research, but maybe aren't represented in the manual? So the 3, I would say, key takeaways from those studies are that it was felt that an update of the manual would be an appropriate and necessary thing given recent research. Most practitioners also felt that the level of detail in the 1990 version was appropriate. So that is something, it will be expanded slightly, but we're also, again, not trying to make this, so lengthy that it's not functional. And then again, just some of those topics such as range maps, damaging agents and their connection to climate change and ecosystem services were also identified as pretty key areas that more information would be beneficial for. And so from that, we developed kind of a comprehensive long-term goal for the project that's broken down into 3 different points. One is enabling the document to reflect the most current science. And part of that is the new SNA will be a digital document that will get put onto a maintenance schedule and will receive frequent updates. And so this is designed to be a living document, not a single published standalone on a shelf, wait, 20 years to get updated again. But we're trying to introduce a model that would allow for more constant updates to reflect current research. Along with that is making this an electronic document that people could pull up on, whatever, if they're using iPads in the field or whatever sort of technology that they'd be able to reference it and not have to carry around a book per se. And then we're also trying to make this a more holistically inclusive document of all the species. Well, all is maybe a bit ambitious, but to include more species throughout North America and have better representation in Canada and Mexico, so that we really get a North American document and not just a US dominated document. So progress so far, we do have formal endorsement from the US Forest Service, the Canadian Forest Service, and the National Forestry Commission of Mexico, which are kind of our three presiding bodies over the project. We have about 100 project staff that are involved in the project right now. A majority of that is from the governmental sector, but we have lots of folks from different academic and university settings in the project as well. And so getting a little bit deeper into how the project teams are structured, you'll see we have the leadership committee, as I mentioned, and we have our core committee, which this is our main working group. And so that kind of 100 or so folks are mainly comprised here. We have these split up into species group teams and section teams. Species group teams represent the 3 types of chapters that you'll be able to find in the new SNA. The section teams represent the specific sections that will be represented in every single species chapter. These teams are divided between, each team has about 2 to 4 co-leads and about 15 members on these teams. And each of these teams are tasked with, one, helping to create the overall chapter outline that will be provided to authors for them to draft chapters, as well as these teams also represent our peer review process. And so whenever a chapter is submitted, folks on this team will also be reviewing those chapters. Additionally, we have support team roles, and that represents a lot of kind of the behind the scenes work that keeps the project going. And then in conjunction with that, allowing for constant updates in the future, we will be adding a maintenance team for that long-term upkeep of the document. So the current manual structure, and again, you'll see this reflects the core committee teams we mentioned on the last slide. So as with the old manual, we still will have a coniferous section, a deciduous section, but it was also determined valuable for us to have an exotic and invasives delineation as well, just because the management that goes into those species can be a little bit different. And then our chapter sections, these by and large, some of the names have changed and this is still in flux, but these represent what was in the old SNA. The key differences to notice here are that drought, wildland fire, and insects and disease were topics that were sometimes addressed under the damaging agents section of the old manual, but we've now upgraded these to have their own standalone sections. And then we've also added a section on urban forestry to address those unique challenges. So for the authorship process, we have not opened authorship yet. We are currently still finalizing the chapter templates that will be provided to authors. However, we'll have 2 main mechanisms for this. One is a typical process where if you're interested in authoring, there will be an application that is available on the project website. You can submit your species interest, your credentials, that will go through a standardized evaluation process. If you're chosen to be a lead author, you have complete control to select your co-authors. We'll also have a group of individuals who have noted interest in being available for co-author spots. So if you feel that you would like a co-author for a specific subject, that can be provided. And along with that, you'll get templates and timeline expectations. Additionally, we are working out the details of having a coordinated graduate symposium, which is essentially a mechanism where it's geared towards master's level students primarily, but where an instructor could hold a course that would teach students about doing literature search and the process for creating a paper like this that would still have review and approval by their instructor, but this would be a way for students to potentially get co-author spots within the manual. And I actually want to jump back for just a moment real quick. Forgotten to mention this on this slide. But so one of the things also I wanted to highlight is just that with having this being a living document, these are our predefined sections, but one of the advantages of this is it lets us introduce new topics in the future, should that be determined a good route. And so, for instance, it's been discussed as having a, potentially having a section on current research questions or information gaps, so people could utilize this manual as a way to promote and find new research questions. Potentially a citizen science dynamic has been suggested. And additionally, potentially a little bit more relevant to this group has been us evaluating what would be the best way to incorporate and represent traditional ecological knowledge in this group from different Indigenous partners. And right now, the U.S. Forest Service stance is to wait on that, given there's an initiative from the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy and the Council on Environmental Quality to develop guidance for federal agencies on including traditional ecological knowledge. And so that is something that we have paused for the time being until that guidance gets fully fleshed out. But again, with it being a living document, that is something that could be revisited in the future. Then jumping ahead past authorship, since we discussed that, to the review process. Again, essentially, when a chapter is submitted, that will first go to the section teams. All of a given section team member will provide a review that gets approved by their co-lead, that then gets sent to the species group teams, which are those overall chapter teams. One of their members will provide a review, again, gets approved by the co-lead. If the co-lead feels that that is worthy of final acceptance, then the author will be notified. That will be incorporated into the manual. The author will be acknowledged in the manual. If there are revisions that are required, that will again get communicated to the lead author, and they'll have the opportunity to make revisions before submitting that again. Current timeline, again, we're targeting to hopefully have chapter templates finalized around November, and then we'll open up open up the project for author nominations. This will be an ongoing project, so there's not an application cutoff time per se. And so, but we hope to kind of have those first rounds of authorship decisions for whoever is submitted to have those kind of ironed out by December. And then hopefully we can at least get a few of those chapters online in December. But again, chapters will get uploaded into this new online manual as soon as they are completed. So this will be an ongoing thing. And then lastly, I will just note that if you'd like to get involved, we have a survey that is at the link on the top left, that tiny URL /join USNAP. So you can go to that link, also a QR code if that's something that's helpful for you. So if you go there, there will be, you can indicate interest in joining one of the core committees, being a lead author, indicate interest in participating in one of the graduate seminars, or there's also a free response for any general feedback or suggestions for the project. We are certainly open to all that and would love to hear any input that you have. If you have further questions or would like more information, we also have our project website that's available at that climatehubs.usda site. As well, you're more than welcome to just send a direct email to myself or our principal investigator, Dr. Stephen McNulty, is also available to hear from you regarding whatever it is you have to suggest for the project. And with that, I will take questions if any folks have any questions about the project.
Thank you, Cameron. That was a great presentation. For folks who have questions, you can feel free to unmute yourself and ask Cameron directly, or throw it in the chat and I can give them to Cameron. I had one question for you, Cameron.
Yeah.
Well, I guess two. One, I was wondering if you could make your slides available so that we could share it with those that registered.
Would be more than happy to do that.
Awesome. And then the other was, I was wondering, With the White House policy on how to integrate traditional ecological knowledge moving forward is kind of still in the works. What's the timeline for which you want to start revisiting the idea of including TEK in the chapters of the SNA update?
Sure. So we don't, again, and this is kind of one of those with the, it being a virtual document, we do have the added benefit of, if something seems relevant in 2 years or 5 years, we can work on that. I personally, the last time that I've looked into this policy and the development of the guidance, which I think is kind of true with a lot of different federal initiatives, is, there's not necessarily a hard deadline on this will be fully complete and figured out at XYZ timeline. So for us, we're very flexible with it. So whenever that, I think it's something that if that federal guidance gets fully, approved and developed by the White House and then makes its way into the Forest Service, and the Forest Service, doesn't want to amend that or make any adjustments for that, then it's something that we would then take to our particular project staff. And I think that we would also want to host our own, meetings with groups like this one, and just to make sure that there's not any specifics for our project that we would be missing on this. So, I mean, I'm imagining we're probably still years out before that's, fully trickled down and fully engaged. If that happens in a year and we're able to start hosting meetings on it, great. But I think, especially with a topic like this, we don't just want to charge forward and put something down that's not going to be the most appropriate and representative thing, especially if this document is going to be, a go-to reference guide. So we certainly want that information represented, in the best way. So it's not, we don't want to rush it, but as soon as it's available, we're happy to revisit it. But unfortunately, I just don't have a hard, timeline on that.
Okay.
And I sorry, I was just going to say one more thing, because it's also something, that's the US federal guidance. But again, with this being a North American document, then that's something that we also have to work in conjunction with Canada and Mexico and kind of get that broad level approval on. So, the US piece would be great, but it is still just one piece of that.
Casey, you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you, Tyler, and thank you for your presentation, Cameron. Just a quick thought too, and it's kind of a comment / question. So it looks like, so there's a committees, there's the kind of US committee, committee in Canada, and then committee representing Mexico.
Yes.
It's, I think, also important to kind of think along the lines, especially with tribal nations. I've been a part of or approached with a similar trans or kind of full North America type project, and this one kind of dealt with like flooding and things like that. And one of the recommendations I made was that, in addition to having like a committee to represent Canada and to represent the US and Mexico, there was exploration and thought in the committee representing tribal nations or that, because I guess a couple things is just acknowledging like the sovereignty of tribal nations in the space of North America, and also acknowledging, especially where you have tribal nations that like our lands are, for example, maybe both in the US and Canada, or maybe both in the US and Mexico. And so, excuse me, Michael, something to kind of think about is like, if those committees are still in development, and if there's like thought to like, there are many sovereign tribal nations within the space of North America too, kind of at that committee level of sharing and decision making. So kind of food for thought on that.
Yeah,
not super like a direct question, but just again, food for thought of, there's 3 countries involved, but there are many sovereign tribal nations within the same space. So at what level kind of in the decision making
Yes.
So.
Yeah, no, that's great. And that's something that we have, yeah, I really appreciate that feedback. And that is something that we've started to think about because, you know, yes, we could have traditional knowledge in terms of like one of those sections that's represented in each chapter. But also I think that, you know, that is a, you know, like a group of stakeholders that would be appropriate to have represented at that leadership committee presiding over the whole project type level. And obviously, you know, as you said, with lots of different sovereign nations, that's lots of groups represented. But I think that if that is something that comes incorporated into the manual, we would want representation at that leadership committee level in the project, for sure.
So thank you, Cameron.
Yeah.
Awesome. Is there any other questions for Cameron before we move on? Okay, and like I had said, Cameron will make his slides available to me. It's also going to be featured in the recording, which I'll share to everyone that's registered. But it sounds like one way to get involved is to give some feedback on that form that's on one of the last slides that Cameron shared. And so if there's folks that aren't here on the call that you think might be able to share some comment or provide some input, feel free to share that with them in your network. But we will circle back on the agenda to the participant tasks for the webinar series. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. All right. So I want to explain the participant tasks and writing reflections we put together for you. These are certainly voluntary, don't need to do them, but I often find myself when I'm participating in webinars like this, you know, I have a point of reflection during the actual webinar. I think about what I'm learning and how it might be applicable to what I do for work. And sometimes I capture this, but sometimes I forget it. And I'm sure I'm not alone there. I'm sure a lot of people have had those great ideas or thoughts just disappear. And I find that I especially do that when I don't write it down or I don't tell it to someone. And so what we would like to do is offer everyone a plan to do just that. So we have a series of 9 tasks, and that was the participant task checklist or loyalty checklist that I sent everyone in the last email about this webinar. And we know that everyone's very busy. And so those 9 tasks could be really difficult to complete. And so it is voluntary. But in addition to that, we also want to honor your hard work in doing those 9 tasks. And so we've got an award or an incentive for folks who do that. And so here is a card that I've created, and this card serves a similar role to the ones that you'd get at a gas station. So, you know, you buy 9 cups of coffee, and if you remember to get your card punched every time, the 10th cup of coffee is free. And so, yeah, it's a free cup of coffee. That's a minimal prize. But I've personally been successful with these loyalty cards at gas stations before. And that 10th cup is a little bit sweeter, knowing that it's free and you're being rewarded for your loyalty as a customer. So we want to try and have a similar feeling here and reward you if you remain loyal and join all the webinars and try to complete the tasks, all 9 of the tasks that we've set out here. And so for each one that you complete, I will punch your card in my records. I got everybody's name, those checklists and those cards here in this binder. And so I'll keep track of things as we move through all the webinars. And you have the chance to win an incentive package with all kinds of good stuff if you get all 9 punched, or if you are the closest to getting all 9 punched. So let's see here, clicking through. In the case that you are trying to get these incentive packages, I need to know whether or not you check something off your list. And so you can do that by letting me know that you've checked something off by sending me an email. A lot of them are like writing reflections. And so you can just draft me an email. It doesn't need to be long, a paragraph, a half paragraph, reflecting to the question that's on the checklist. And you can email that right to me, and I will have a record of it in my email and make sure I get to checking it off in my binder. So if you are the first to finish all 9 tasks and reflections, you will receive this large USET incentive package, which includes a USET 50th anniversary backpack, a 250 milliliter bottle of Passamaquoddy maple syrup, a Passamaquoddy maple pancake and waffle mix, 2-ounce sample bag of coffee from Thunder Island Coffee Roasters, a set of reusable bamboo utensils, and some sweetgrass hand sanitizer spray made by Justine O. Wait, there's more. We want to award those who get very close to being the second to complete all of, or the second closest to completing all of the tasks. And so whoever this is will be the proud recipient of a smaller incentive package. So you'll get a USET Best Practices Conference tote bag, a USET Tribal Epidemiology Center travel mug, a 2-ounce sample bag of coffee from Thunder Island Coffee Roasters, and then a smaller 100 milliliter bottle of Passamaquoddy maple syrup and the sweetgrass sanitizer spray by Justine O. But wait, there's more. The third person to complete all of those tasks, or whoever is the third closest to completing all of the tasks, will get the same incentive package that second place gets. And so it'll include all of the same things that I just went through. But wait. What are the tasks in writing reflection that I'm going to ask you to do? I'm sure you're wondering what those are. So the 9 tasks in writing reflections are as follows. I sent these to you guys via email, and so everyone has them. So I'll be kind of quick to go through these. But the start and end of each webinar will offer the opportunity for you guys to unmute yourselves and share a reflection with the group. If you do that during one of the webinar sessions across the 6, you can check off the first one. And then throughout the webinar series, we have 10 minutes to do a writing reflection. And so that's something that's going to be consistent in each one. At the end of the webinar, the prompt is the same, except for today and then the last day. It's a little different, and I'll get to that on the next slide. But the reflection prompt is one thing I learned from today's webinar was, and you just finish the sentence. So it's very quick. You can share that over the Zoom session, or you can send that in an email to me at t@usetinc.org. And I'll make sure to check off everyone that does these things. And then I've got a series of writing reflections that are specific to each of the presentations or webinars in the 4 that are specific to a particular ecosystem or project. And so those writing reflections will be something I share at the beginning so that everyone is aware of what to kind of think about when they're going. So for example, in the Emerald Ash Borer one that we'll get to, I asked Mi'kmaq Nation Vice Chief and Master Basket Maker Richard Silboy talks about the significance of brown ash. What element of significance for the brown ash tree stuck out to you the most and why? And so you can kind of think about that while you're watching the video and hearing from presenters. And it's going to be the same for a lot of the other ones. So questions like that to kind of get your thoughts moving. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through all of these because they are on the handouts that I sent you. But again, they're specific to the presentations and the virtual site visits. And so the writing reflection for today is going to be a shorter one. You don't have to go all in when you write this up, but just briefly what you think. How do you see the impacts of climate change influencing the work that you do? I know that's a loaded question. You could probably write about it for a very long time. But that is the writing reflection for today's webinar. I'm going to stop my share screen here for a second. And I will put that in the chat so that everyone can take a stab at that writing reflection. And in the interest of time, we're already at 3:30, so we're fairly close to on schedule. But I want to give a little bit of time for folks to try and write something up there about that. Not a timeline. It's not like you have to get this to me by the end of the webinar at 3:40. You can take that question and as you think through what we talked about today and the work that you're involved in at large, how does that question, how would you answer that question? How do you see the impacts of climate change influencing the work that you do? Right now it's 3:32, and I told everyone that we would be done around 3:40. If anyone wants to verbally share a response to that question, feel free to unmute yourself and chime in. Otherwise, I'll get to the closeout slide in a few minutes here.
I'll jump in, Tyler, real briefly. So when we first started this today's webinar, I mentioned, one of my favorite spots is the salt marsh, and climate change impacts that because we really have to pay attention to sea level rise and sea level rise projections. It kind of is a matter of, is this place going to continue to be a salt marsh, or is it going to be in a different state 30, 50 years or 80 years out, and is there a place for actually that salt marsh to move as with sea level rise? So climate change influences the work. Obviously I don't exclusively work on salt marsh, but it's a very important space for our tribal nation, Mashpee Wampanoag tribe, but so many tribal nations in the east and southeast. So
thank you, Casey.
One punch in my coffee card. I'm just kidding.
You are in there, so I'll punch it. Does anyone else want to share a reflection to that question? You can also email it to me, like I said. Okay, I would share that for me, because a lot of my research is focused on brown ash and brown ash forests, if we're going to do all this work to try and preserve a species because of an impact like emerald ash borer, if we're going to prioritize, I mean, some of the practices are pretty expensive, as we'll get to in the webinar focused on that. And if we're going to commit that amount of resources, that amount of time to protect areas, how do we prioritize what areas we do that? If we think about climate change, what areas are brown ash trees projected to be present under future climate projections? At least then we know that in a future climate scenario, that brown ash wetland might still be there 80 years down the road. Of course, there's the impact of emerald ash borer, but if we protect those areas, we know, well, we can protect it from emerald ash borer as best we can, but in addition, we know that maybe climate projections are favorable in that area, so the likelihood of ash being there in the future is even higher. That's just kind of one of the ways I see it kind of working real closely into the specific work that I'm doing, but I think we could probably come up with a lot of different examples across the group. And I noticed we're down in numbers here at the end of the webinar. I wanted to just let everyone know that if there's somebody in the department or in your tribal nation that you think could benefit from the series, feel free to share the emails I sent out about the webinar series with them and have them register. We'd love to have them be a part of the webinar. And so I will share the final slide in this PowerPoint. Well, Ali, thank you everyone for participating in today's webinar. I'm looking forward to the rest of the webinars in the series. I think we will have some great conversations, share some great information with one another. The next webinar in this series will be the adaptive management in brown or black ash wetland forests. That will occur next Monday, August 22nd from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. Central. I hope to see you all there. And if, like I said, if there's someone you think might want to join that webinar, feel free to share that information. If you have any of the reflections that I talked about typed up, and if there's some that are already completed, and some of the tasks that are already completed, you can send me an email at teverett@usetinc.org. This concludes the kickoff webinar, and once again, I thank everyone for joining. Lali.
Thank you, everyone. And just want to acknowledge real quick too, in the chat, Anne Herring McLeod, thank you for responding. Anne says the climate change and other human impacts are affecting habitats and species across the board. Wetlands are necessary for ecosystems and in carbon sequestration. Trying to rebuild habitats and ecosystems to save and or reintroduce animal species is part of what I do. Thank you, Anne, for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you very much, Anne. And if any questions come up, feel free to send me an email. And once again, thank you everyone for joining. And I look forward to our webinar next week.
Thank you.
Kapitanamu. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for your presentation, Cameron.
Thank you guys for hosting. It was great being here.
Tyler, since I'm recording, I'm going to stay on until everybody pops off, and then I'll close it out.
Awesome. And if you want to download that and send it over to communications, as soon as it's ready, I'll send my follow-up email to everyone with that recording attached.
Awesome. Will do.
Thanks, Casey.
Mm-hmm.